Zella threw the ring box at my face and sneered, "You should be grateful a girl like me even dated someone like you." The box bounced off my chest and landed near my feet. I didn't move. My fingers were still numb from holding the bouquet I'd brought to propose. The rain soaked through my shirt, but I couldn't feel a thing. Behind her, Thompson was already holding an umbrella over her head like some knight in shining armor. She didn't even flinch as she walked into his arms, her heels splashing in the shallow water of the sidewalk. He grinned at me like he'd just won a prize. "Come on, man. You had to know you were punching above your weight." Zella didn't even bother to look back. "You're too nice, too plain, too average. I don't want to marry someone who can't even book a reservation at that fancy resort, let alone own a penthouse." I had actually already booked it. Had the confirmation. Email in my inbox. I was even planning to surprise her with the keys to the penthouse I'd secretly bought after closing the biggest deal of my life. But she didn't care. Zella only ever saw what she wanted to see. She thought I was just some quiet, predictable man with no future. She didn't know who I was behind the scenes, or maybe she did, and it just didn't matter to her anymore. When I didn't react, she scoffed. "Don't make this a big scene. Be mature. Let me go." I looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm not stopping you." Zella blinked. For a moment, something flickered in her expression. "Good," she said a little too quickly, "because Thompson is everything you're not." Then they walked away, and I stood there, still holding that damn bouquet like an idiot. I laughed to myself quietly, not out of sadness, not even out of pain, out of clarity. That night, I deleted every photo of her from my phone, blocked her number, and when her sister Louise called me the next day, crying, apologizing on Zella's behalf, begging me not to give up on love, I already knew. It wasn't Zella who deserved me. It was the woman who had seen my worth from the very beginning. My name is Adam, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I had it all figured out. On the outside, I was just a regular guy, quiet, polite, the kind of man who held the door open, remembered anniversaries, and bought flowers without needing a reason. To most people, I was simple, predictable, the kind of guy you don't look at twice at a party. But what they didn't know, what I never bothered to show, was that behind every gentle smile, behind the ordinary job title and average apartment, was a man who built empires in silence. Zella was the only one who ever got close to that truth. We met 3 years ago at a gallery opening. She was elegance wrapped in ambition, the kind of woman who made every head turn but only looked straight ahead. When our eyes met, I thought it was a mistake, that maybe I stood in someone else's spotlight. But she walked up to me, tilted her head, and said, "You don't look like you belong here. That's why I'm curious." I fell hard. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she carried herself, the way she made the world bend around her. And for a while, I was proud to stand beside her. She told me she liked that I didn't try to impress her, that I didn't fawn or beg, that I had potential. I should have seen the red flag in that word. Potential. Like I was some project she took on, something to polish until it matched her lifestyle. But I was blinded. I mistook her critiques for care, her coldness for confidence, her control for love. In those early months, she made me feel chosen. Out of everyone who wanted her, she had picked me. That felt like something. Like I mattered. What I didn't realize was she didn't pick me because she saw my value. She picked me because she thought I was easy to shape. I let her decorate my apartment, change my wardrobe, decide where we went, what we did, even who I should speak to. She told me which friends of mine were low tier and which events were worth our time. And I let her, because I thought compromising was part of love. Because I thought her world was bigger, brighter, something I should be grateful to step into. It wasn't that I didn't have power, I just didn't use it. I let her think I was ordinary. Let her mock the second car I never drove, the small apartment I rarely slept in. I didn't correct her when she called my modest office quaint, never told her I owned the entire floor of that building. Because I wasn't with her to prove something. I was with her because somehow, in her chaotic, demanding way, she made me feel needed. But over time, something shifted. The compliments stopped. The affection faded. In its place came subtle digs, comparisons, and sighs of disappointment that weren't even hidden anymore. "I don't get why you don't aim higher," she'd say, scrolling through pictures of luxury vacations. "You're smart, Adam, but you're not ambitious enough. You could be someone if you really tried." I used to smile through it, tell myself she meant well, that she believed in me. But deep down, I started to wonder, did she even see me? Then came the breaking point. I had planned the proposal for months, quietly bought the ring, booked the villa she always talked about, arranged a private chef, the rooftop dinner, the string quartet, all of it. And just before I could lead her there, she told me she needed space, that she didn't think I was on her level, that maybe someone like Thompson, richer, flashier, louder, made more sense for a woman like her. She didn't know about the villa or the ring, or the fact that I'd just sold my third startup for 8 figures. She thought she was leaving behind a safety net. She didn't realize she was walking away from the storm. The next day, I disappeared from her world. No calls, no messages, no desperate pleas. I left her in silence. But what surprised me most wasn't her betrayal. It was the phone call I got later that night. "Adam?" a soft voice said. "It's Louise, Zella's sister. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. You're a good man." Louise, the one who always stood in the background. The quiet, observant one. The one who never interrupted but always noticed. We had barely spoken during those 3 years. A few smiles at dinners, polite small talk at events. But I remembered the way she looked at me, not with judgment, not like I was a stepping stone or a project, just like I mattered. That night, she told me she used to envy Zella, not because of her beauty or her confidence, but because she had me, because I treated Zella with the kind of devotion every woman dreams of, because I was the kind of man she wished someone would be for her. That call changed everything, because for the first time, I realized I was never the one trying to prove my worth. Zella was the one who failed to recognize it. And Louise, she saw it from the very beginning. It started with a dinner, a small, quiet gathering at Zella's family estate. Just her, her parents, her sister Louise, and me. Zella had asked me to come after a week of complete silence. After she walked away into Thompson's arms, I hadn't expected to hear from her again. But that morning, she sent a message. "Come tonight. I want to talk. Properly. I should have ignored it." But curiosity has a way of creeping in, especially when someone who once held your heart wants another conversation. So I went. The dining hall was lit in soft golden hues, long candles flickering, the air scented with roses and polished wood. It was all carefully arranged. Too carefully. Zella sat at the head of the table, composed and unreadable. Her father barely looked at me. Her mother nodded politely, forced. Louise was already seated, her eyes locking with mine the moment I entered. There was something in her expression, hesitation, maybe even worry, but she didn't say anything. I sat beside Zella, and the moment I did, she leaned over with a smile too practiced to be real. "I'm glad you came. It shows you're still mature enough to have a real conversation." I said nothing. Dinner began. Small talk. Her father ranted about business. Her mother praised Thompson's latest investment. Zella nodded, interjected, with rehearsed pride, and every so often cast glances in my direction like she was trying to measure something. Then came the blow. "I've decided to give us another try," Zella announced casually as she placed her fork down. "But only if you're ready to grow up." I looked at her slowly. "Grow up?" She folded her hands neatly. "You've been distant, dramatic. I understand you were hurt, but we both made mistakes. And honestly, I don't blame you for being insecure. Thompson just has more experience in certain areas." A silence settled across the table. Louise froze with her wine halfway to her lips. I kept my voice low. So, you're saying I should forget everything you did? That little public performance with Thompson? That was a mistake? Zella smiled like she was being generous. Thompson and I were just reminiscing. He's an old friend. It got emotional. I admit it went a little too far, but that's not reason enough to throw away everything we had. Throw away? I repeated quietly. You threw me away, then said I should be grateful. She sighed. Adam, don't be petty. If you'd just show more ambition, like Thompson, you'd understand how high-value men act. Louise spoke up then. Zella, stop. But Zella ignored her. Thompson, she went on, was willing to offer me a future, luxury, legacy. You, Adam, you offer loyalty. Sweet, but not sustainable. I thought maybe if you felt a little pressure, you'd finally step up. Pressure. It hit me then. The proposal at my expense, the fake tears, the way Thompson had held her, whispered to her in front of me. It was all planned, manipulated. You used me, I said, hurt me, humiliated me, just to see if I'd fight for you harder. Zella tilted her head, feigning innocence. Is that so wrong? Love needs tests. No, love needs trust, I said, pushing back from the table. And you failed that, she stood. Adam, sit down. Don't make this scene ugly. My parents are here. Her father finally spoke. Son, listen. Zella's emotional. She just wanted to make sure you're serious. We're willing to overlook your behavior if you're willing to commit. I laughed. Cold. Quiet. Then turned to Zella. You asked me to come here to talk, but you didn't want a conversation. You wanted control. Louise stood up too. Adam, wait. Let me walk you out. Zella's voice hardened. Of course. Let him run off with my sister now. That's what this is, isn't it? That hit the table like a grenade. Her mother gasped. Her father narrowed his eyes. Louise turned pale. What are you talking about? Louise said, her voice sharp. You're the one who cheated. Zella's laugh was cold. Cheating? I never even slept with Thompson, but at least he makes me feel like I deserve more. Adam, he just makes me feel like I'm settling. I stepped toward her then, voice low but firm. You didn't cheat with your body. You cheated with your heart, with your mind. And that's worse. Zella blinked, something uncertain flickering in her eyes. I was going to propose that day, I added. I had the ring. I had the villa. I had the life you said you always wanted, and you spat on it. Her lips parted slightly. For once, she had no words. Then Louise said softly, I knew something happened that day. I felt it. And I told you. Zella, you were pushing too far, Zella snapped. Don't act innocent. You always wanted what I had. You think I didn't notice the way you looked at him? Louise didn't deny it. She just looked at me. Not with shame. Not with pride. Just truth. I did look at him, she said, because you didn't. Not the way he deserved. The air was heavy. Zella stared at her sister like she was seeing her for the first time. Her hands clenched at her sides. I walked to the door, and before I left, I turned once more. You told me I didn't deserve you, I said calmly. And you were right. I deserved better. Then I walked away. Not just from the dinner, not just from the house, but from everything I had once believed was love. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, just the empty roads and the weight of Zella's words echoing in my head. Every red light felt like a slap, every turn like a rerun of the moment she said, You should be grateful I even dated you. It wasn't the breakup that stung. It was the insult, the dismissal, the fact that for 3 years I'd given her my quiet devotion, my steady presence, my heart in pieces, and she tossed it all away like it was never enough. Maybe I was the fool. Maybe I let her wear me down so gradually that I didn't even notice the small ways I was disappearing. I used to laugh more, sleep better. I used to have peace. Now, I couldn't even close my eyes without hearing her voice dripping with superiority, comparing me to Thompson like I was some runner-up prize. But worst of all, it wasn't just the betrayal that broke me, it was the possibility that maybe, just maybe, I had believed her. Believed I wasn't enough. Believed I had to prove my worth to someone who never even looked for it. I pulled over somewhere near the cliffs. The ocean was wild that night, crashing against the rocks like it was trying to scream louder than the voices in my head. I sat, on the hood of the car, the cold seeping into my spine, but I didn't care. The silence was the only thing that didn't lie. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again. Louise. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the answer button. I didn't want pity. I didn't want comfort. I didn't want anyone to see the version of me that was barely holding it together. But I answered. Anyway, Adam? Her voice was soft, hesitant. I saw you leave. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I didn't say anything. Not for a few seconds. Then, you ever feel like everything you were building was just so you could hand it to someone else? She was quiet. Then she said, yes, every day, when I watched Zella waste your love. Something in me cracked. I didn't expect her to say that. I didn't expect anyone to see me at all, let alone say it like that. I thought love was supposed to be enough, I said. Louise breathed in, and then out. No, being loved is supposed to be enough, but only if the other person values it. She understood. She got it. And that terrified me, because Zella had spent 3 years beside me, never truly understanding who I was, never caring to learn. But Louise? One conversation, and she touched the part of me I'd been burying under silence. That night, I sat by the ocean until the sky began to lighten, thinking about everything. The night Zella left me waiting, saying she was networking. The times she mocked my friends or laughed when I told her about my small business wins. The birthdays she missed, the holidays she made about herself. The time I was sick and she told me not to act dramatic because she had a photo shoot, and I remembered something else. A night 2 years ago when I had pulled an all-nighter to hit a deal deadline. I came home at 6 a.m. Zella was asleep, but Louise had been in the kitchen visiting for the weekend. She poured me a glass of water, made eggs without asking, and said, "Don't burn out for people who won't notice." At the time, I thought she meant it as a general truth. Now I knew she meant Zella. All this time, I'd been begging for crumbs from someone who held the whole cake and refused to share it. Meanwhile, someone else had been silently watching, quietly, understanding, never intruding, but always seeing. I didn't know what to do with that. Was it wrong to think about Louise like this? Was it betrayal? Or was it just the first breath of air after being underwater for too long? The next few days were quiet. No texts from Zella, no apologies, no sudden realization, just silence. And yet, that silence healed more than her voice ever could. I started sleeping again, eating better. Went back to my office, my real office, the one she never saw, and started working like a man with a purpose again. The employees greeted me differently. With respect. With fear, even. I had let myself shrink in Zella's shadow, but now I remembered who I was, the founder of 3 tech companies, a silent investor in 5 others, a man with quiet power, not loud wealth. I didn't need to scream it to the world, but I had stopped, hiding. Then one afternoon, Louise showed up at my office. She was holding a small bag of pastries. "I remembered you like the ones with almond filling," she said, her voice unsure. "I thought, maybe you haven't been eating well." I stared at the bag, then at her. And for the first time in weeks, my chest didn't feel heavy. "You didn't have to come all this way," I said quietly. "I know," she replied. "But sometimes the people who do the most are the ones no one notices." I didn't want to make that mistake again. Her eyes were red, but her hands were steady. She wasn't here to fix me. She wasn't here to take Zella's place. She was just here, and that meant everything. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then I asked, "Why do you care?" She looked at me, no hesitation this time. Because someone should. And that was the moment I realized. Zella was a storm, but Louise was shelter. It was the second Sunday after that dinner. I had just finished a call with a Japanese investor when my assistant buzzed in. "Adam, you might want to come downstairs." I frowned. "What is it?" "It's Zella. She's in the lobby, and she's not alone." I sighed, rubbed the bridge of my nose, and stood. "Give me 5. By the time I got down, I already had a feeling something was off. But I didn't expect this. Zella was standing there, dressed immaculately in a white designer blouse and high heels, holding a toddler in her arms. Beside her was Thompson. His arm was around her waist. His smile was smug. Her eyes were red but dry. People in the lobby were already whispering. My voice was cold. "What is this?" Zella stepped forward. "Adam, I need to talk to you, privately." "I don't think we have anything left to say." She glanced at Thompson, who nodded at her to go on. Zella clutched the child a little tighter, then looked at me and said something that froze the entire room. "This is your son." The air turned into ice. I stared at her, trying to find even a single trace of sincerity on her face, but all I saw was manipulation, performance, precision. She was calculating every move. I let out a quiet breath. "Is this a joke?" She shook her head, eyes wide. "No. I found out I was pregnant a few weeks after you and I didn't know how to tell you. I panicked. But he's yours, Adam. I swear it." I looked at the child. A boy. Maybe 2. Big brown eyes, soft curls, clutching, a toy truck. "And Thompson?" I asked. Thompson grinned. "I'm just helping her. You know me. I'm always around when someone drops the ball." Zella spoke quickly. "I don't want anything from you. I'm not here to beg. But you have a right to know. And he has a right to know his father." I said nothing for a long time, because if what she said was true, it changed everything. And if it was a lie, it was the lowest, most twisted thing she'd ever done. I turned to her. "DNA test today. No delays." She hesitated, only for a second, but I saw it. Then she nodded. "Fine." I gave instructions to my assistant, then turned and walked away without another word. The next day, the results came in, and the boy wasn't mine. Zella had lied. She had brought someone else's child to my doorstep, hoping to bind me to her again, hoping guilt would replace the love she burned to ashes. When I confronted her, she didn't even apologize. "You're the only man I ever truly saw a future with," she said, her voice hollow. "Thompson is a clown. He knows it. I know it. But I thought if I could get you to feel something again." I stared at her like I was seeing a stranger. "You thought using a child would bring me back?" I asked. Her eyes welled up. I had nothing else left. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying because her last weapon failed. That evening, as I stood by the windows of my penthouse office, Louise called. "I heard," she said softly. "She really went that far?" I didn't speak for a moment, then I said, "She's gone off the edge." Louise didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't gloat. She just listened. That silence, peaceful, steady, felt more comforting than 1,000 words. Then she added something I didn't expect. "She's desperate, Adam, because she knows the version of you she thought didn't exist was real all along. And now, she's lost it forever." And she was right. Zella hadn't just lost a man. She had lost the only one who had loved her without asking for anything in return, and she was finally beginning to realize what that meant. But it was too late. The bridge was already in flames. It happened during the annual Soren Foundation Gala, one of the city's most exclusive events. a place where business moguls, politicians, and high society gathered under chandeliers to sip wine and silently calculate each other's worth. Hadn't planned on going this year. I hated those rooms full of polished liars and fake smiles. But Louise was being honored for her work in community health, and she had personally asked me to attend. She met me at the entrance, dressed in deep emerald. Not flashy, elegant, confident, effortlessly graceful in a way that Zella had always tried to manufacture, but never quite mastered. "I'm glad you came," she said softly, slipping her hand into mine. "I thought you'd dodge it." "I almost did," I admitted. "But I figured I should be there for someone who deserves it." Her smile was small, but it stayed in her eyes. Inside, the ballroom was already full. Names whispered in corners, camera flashes going off, and waiters weaving through the crowd with champagne flutes. I caught a few surprised glances as Louise and I entered together hand in hand. Most people still associated my name with Zella. Seeing me with her sister now, it sent a message, loud and clear. We'd barely taken our seats when I heard it. The unmistakable voice. Sharp, calculated, laced with bitterness. Zella. She made her entrance with Thompson trailing behind her like an obedient dog. Her gown was glittering, her makeup flawless, but something in her face had changed. The confidence was cracked, the control slipping. She saw me, and for a second, froze. Her eyes dropped to where Louise's hand was still resting on my arm. And then she smiled. The kind of smile you give before setting something on fire. During the speeches, she kept stealing glances at me, whispering to Thompson, who looked increasingly uncomfortable with every passing minute. He knew something, or maybe he was just waiting for the explosion, and it came, right after Louise received her award. As she returned to our table, the MC announced a surprise speaker. Zella. I blinked. Louise's hand tensed slightly around her champagne glass. I leaned toward her. "Did you know about this?" Shook her head. "No. This wasn't in the schedule." Zella took the stage, the spotlight hitting her perfectly. She held the mic like she was hosting a show. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her tones syrupy. "Before we move on to the final segment, I'd like to share a personal story. One about love, betrayal, and..." Her eyes locked with mine. "Regret." A quiet murmur rippled through the room. She continued. "There was a time I thought I had everything, a loyal partner, a stable future, but I was bored. I thought I deserved more. So I walked away, and someone else stepped in. People started turning toward me now, some recognizing the implications, others outright whispering, 'I hurt him, I lied to him.' And when I realized what I lost, I tried to fix it, but he had already moved on to someone else, someone close to me." Louise sat perfectly still. Zella's voice trembled, but it wasn't from emotion. It was performance. "Tonight, I just want to ask one thing. Adam, do you ever think of what we could have been?" The room went completely silent. All eyes turned to me. I stood up slowly. Every part of me wanted to walk out, to let her embarrass herself in front of everyone and stew in it alone. But I'd spent enough time running from confrontation. Tonight, I would finish what she started. I walked to the front, past waiters frozen in place and guests pretending not to listen too closely. I took the mic from her hand gently. Zella looked at me like she was waiting for a confession. For me to say I still loved her. For me to validate her delusion one last time. But I smiled and turned to the crowd. "Zella's right," I said. "She did hurt me, lied to me, left me for a man who couldn't handle the silence of his own shadow. And when she saw that I was still standing, thriving even, she tried to tie me back to her with a child that wasn't even mine." Gasps. Several guests turned toward Thompson, who went pale instantly. I kept going. But I don't hate her. In fact, I'm grateful. Because it was through her that I learned what not to accept in love. Through her, I realized that loyalty isn't weakness, that kindness isn't passivity, that I am not someone who needs to prove my worth to anyone. My eyes found Louise. Because the right person won't need you to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. Zella looked like she'd been slapped, her mouth opened slightly, her voice gone. I handed the mic back to the MC and returned to my seat beside Louise, who was blinking quickly, trying not to cry. The applause started slowly, then grew louder. Zella remained frozen at the podium for a few seconds before finally stepping down, face like cracked porcelain. Thompson was already gone. Later that night, when the event was over and the cameras were off, I stood outside the venue with Louise. The city lights stretched behind her, the wind lifting strands of her hair. "You didn't have to say all that," she whispered. "I did." She looked at me. "Why?" I took her hand. "Because you're not a secret, and I'm done letting the wrong people take credit for who I've become." Her smile was soft, honest. "A little bit sad. Zella's not going to give up, you know. She already lost," I said. "Because of me?" I shook my head. "No, because of herself." She leaned into me then, her head against my shoulder. "Do you regret it?" she asked quietly. "Everything with her?" I thought about it for a moment. "No," I said, "because if it wasn't for her, I would have never seen you." And that was the moment I realized the real climax wasn't in the confrontation or even the speech. It was in the fact that I was finally, truly, free. Not just from Zella, but from the version of myself that ever believed I wasn't enough. 3 weeks passed after the gala. 3 quiet, surreal weeks where I expected chaos, backlash, another stunt from Zella, but instead there was silence. No press ambush, no tearful messages, no "I miss you" letters, just silence. And that silence, it wasn't peace. It was a storm winding up. I felt it in my gut. Then one morning, my lawyer forwarded me an email chain. Zella and Thompson were trying to sell confidential files from one of my early tech companies to a rival firm. They had stolen old backups, code, client lists, financials, and were negotiating under the table. It was bold, but stupid. They didn't know I already owned that rival firm. Quietly, through 3 layers of shell companies, I set the trap in 2 hours. Let them think the deal was about to close. Let them schedule a meeting. Let them sign the fake contracts. Let them smile, thinking they'd finally outplayed me. Then I walked into the boardroom. Zella's face turned sheet white the moment she saw me. Thompson choked mid-laugh. I dropped a folder on the table and sat down across from them, casual as ever. "You know," I said, "when someone steals from you once, you start keeping track. When they try it again, you bring the fire." Thompson tried to speak. "This isn't—" I cut him off with a single look. "You'll both be receiving court summons tomorrow. I've compiled everything. Emails, audio recordings, security footage. You really thought you could walk into my world and play games?" Zella's hands trembled. "Adam, please listen." "No," I said calmly. "I already did. For 3 years I listened. I tolerated. I forgave. But you're not a mistake anymore. You're a lesson." She blinked rapidly. "I loved you." "No, you used me," I replied. "You tried to control me, belittle me, manipulate me. Then when you realized I was never your project, you panicked." "I just wanted to fix us," she whispered. I leaned forward, voice sharp but steady. "You don't fix a car by blowing it up, Zella," Thompson finally snapped. "You're acting like a saint, but you're just bitter she picked me first." I laughed. A cold, effortless laugh. "She picked you because she thought I was weak. She stayed with you because she had no choice. But deep down, she always knew I was the one with the power." Then I stood and looked directly at both of them. "You tried to sell stolen assets. You'll be in court by the end of the month. I could destroy you in one motion. But I won't. That's not the revenge I want." Zella looked confused. Thompson scoffed. "So what, you're letting us go?" I smiled. "No, I'm letting everyone else watch you go down." I left the room. And within 48 hours, every business contact they had dropped them. Every investor pulled out. Their names trended, not for fashion, not for charm, but for fraud. Louise watched it all unfold quietly. She never once said good job or they deserved it. She just sat beside me in silence, sometimes slipping her hand into mine, sometimes resting her head on my shoulder. She knew I didn't need praise. I needed release. One afternoon, we were sitting in the garden behind my estate. The sun was low, the sky painted with orange and gold. Louise looked over at me and asked, "Are you done?" I took a sip of tea, then nodded. "Yeah, I am. You don't want to push further?" "No," I said, "because they're already burning. And I'm not wasting another match." She smiled, proud. "You're not the same man I met at that gallery years ago." "No," I agreed, "but I wish he'd met you sooner." She touched my cheek. "He's still here. He just finally opened his eyes." A week later, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address. Zella, the ink was smudged. The words shaky. She begged me not to press charges. Said she'd lost everything. Her friends, her family. Even Thompson had left. She wrote that she couldn't sleep, couldn't breathe, couldn't believe I had turned into someone so cold. But the part that stood out most? "You used to love me. Doesn't that mean anything?" I held the letter over the fireplace, watched the flame take it slowly, page by page, line by line. Because the truth was simple. I did love her. And that's what made her downfall so satisfying. Because she didn't lose me when she left. She lost me the moment she believed I wasn't worth keeping. That night, I took Louise out to the same villa I'd once planned to propose to Zella at, the same rooftop, same string lights, same music. Except this time, there was no hesitation. No doubt I knelt, and she laughed, not out of surprise, but because she knew. "I was wondering when you'd catch up," she whispered, tears in her eyes. "I needed to bury the past first," I said. "Now I'm ready." She said yes. Not because I bought a villa, not because I had money, not because I had power, but because when the dust settled, she still saw me, and that's the difference. Zella wanted to be loved by the version of me she could control. Louise loved the man I already was. That was my ultimate revenge. Not the court case, not the bankruptcy, not the downfall, but the fact that in the end, Zella was alone, and I wasn't.